The sledgehammer felt heavy in Marcus's trembling hands as he stared at the crystal-clear water one last time. 23 years of memories would be gone by sunset. But as the first crack split the concrete, he had no idea that destroying his own pool would unleash a legal nightmare that would cost him everything, or that his entitled neighbor Karen had been secretly recording every swing, building a case that would turn his act of desperate love into what she claimed was criminal. Destruction of community property. The officer's handcuffs clicked cold against his wrists just as the lawsuit papers flooded to his flooded backyard, and for the first time in his life, Marcus realized that sometimes doing the right thing for your family makes you the perfect target for someone else's twisted revenge. The morning sun cast dancing reflections across the pool surface, each ripple catching light like scattered diamonds. Marcus Chen stood at the edge of his backyard oasis, watching his 8-year-old daughter Emma take what would be her final swim in the pool he'd built with his own hands 23 years ago. "Daddy, watch this," Emma called out, preparing for another cannonball that would send chlorinated water splashing across the pristine deck tiles. Marcus forced a smile, his throat tight with emotion he couldn't let show. "That was amazing, sweetheart. The best one yet." The medical bills spread across his kitchen table told a different story than his encouraging words. Stage 3 lymphoma didn't care about childhood memories or perfect summer mornings. The treatments Emma needed would cost more than their house was worth, and the insurance company had already started their carefully worded denials. "Marcus, you sure about this?" His brother David emerged from the sliding glass doors, holding 2 cups of coffee that had long since gone cold. "There's got to be another way." "The contractor's coming at noon," Marcus replied, not taking his eyes off Emma as she practiced her backstroke. "Pool removal and concrete pad installation. The whole thing will be done in 3 days." David set the cups on the patio table, his face creased with concern. "But this pool, man, you built this thing when Sarah was pregnant with Emma. You hand-laid every tile. And now it's worth $60,000 in removal and resale." Marcus's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he reached for the coffee. "The pump equipment alone will cover 2 months of treatment." "What about the neighborhood association? Didn't you sign some kind of agreement about property modifications?" Marcus waved dismissively. "It's my property. I can remove whatever I want from my own backyard." They both turned as the unmistakable sound of Karen Whitmore's voice carried across the fence line. She was in her garden, but her voice was raised just enough to ensure it carried. "I'm telling you, Patricia, property values in this neighborhood have been maintained for 15 years specifically because of the aesthetic standards we've all agreed to uphold," Karen was saying into her phone, though she was clearly performing for an audience. "When people start making unilateral decisions that affect everyone else's investment." "Ignore her," David muttered. "She's been looking for a reason to cause trouble since you wouldn't trim your oak tree last spring." But Marcus was watching Karen through the gap in the fence slats. She had her phone held at an odd angle, and something about her posture suggested she wasn't just talking, she was recording. "Emma, time to get out," Marcus called, his instincts suddenly alert. 5 more minutes. Emma pleaded, her hair plastered to her head as she treaded water in the deep end. "Now, honey, the contractor will be here soon." As Emma reluctantly climbed the ladder, water streaming from her bright pink swimsuit, Karen's voice rose again. "The thing is, Patricia, some of these pools were installed as part of the original neighborhood development plan. There might be restrictions about removal that affect drainage patterns for everyone." Marcus felt his jaw clench. The pool had been installed 5 years after they'd bought the house, well after any original development plans. Karen knew that. She'd been living 2 houses down when he'd gotten the permits. The doorbell rang, echoing through the house. Marcus checked his watch. 11:45. The contractor was early. "I'll get it," David offered, but Marcus was already moving. He opened the front door to find Jake Morrison, the pool removal specialist he'd hired, along with a younger man carrying surveying equipment. "Mr. Chen." "Jake Morrison from Coastal Pool Services. This is my partner Tony. We are ready to take a look and finalize the removal plan." "Actually, Mr. Chen," Tony interrupted, holding up a tablet, "we might have a problem. I just got off the phone with the county permits office. There's been a complaint filed about unpermitted modifications to drainage systems." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. What kind of complaint? "Someone filed a formal objection to the removal, claiming it violates neighborhood covenants and could affect water runoff for adjacent properties, Jake explained, his expression apologetic but professional. Until it's resolved, we can't proceed. Who filed the complaint? Marcus asked, though he already knew. A. Tony consulted his tablet. Karen Whitmore. She's listed as secretary of the Willowbrook Neighborhood Association. The coffee cup slipped from Marcus's hand, shattering. On the front steps. Behind him, he could hear Emma asking David why everyone looked upset. How long does this kind of thing take to resolve? Marcus asked, his mind racing through treatment schedules and bank account balances. Could be weeks, could be months. Jake said reluctantly, depends on whether she's willing to withdraw the complaint or if you have to go through the whole mediation process. Marcus looked past the contractors to Karen's house. She was standing in her front yard now, no longer pretending to garden, watching the scene with the satisfied expression of someone who just played a winning hand. Mr. Chen. Tony prompted. What do you want us to do? Emma appeared at Marcus's elbow, tugging on his shirt. Daddy, why can't they take out the pool? I thought you said we needed the money for my medicine. The words hit him like a physical blow. He knelt down to Emma's level, seeing his own desperation reflected in her innocent eyes. It's just a delay, sweetheart. We'll figure it out. But as he stood up, he saw Karen walking toward them with purposeful strides, a folder clutched in her manicured hands and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Marcus, she called out sweetly, I hope you don't mind, but I felt it was my duty, as Neighborhood Association Secretary, to make sure all proper procedures are followed. I have some documents here that I think you'll find very interesting. She reached the group and opened the folder with a flourish, revealing official-looking papers with the county seal. It turns out your pool was installed during a period when there was a moratorium on major water features due to drought restrictions. The original permit should never have been issued. Her voice carried the tone of someone delivering news they'd been dying to share. That makes it a non-conforming structure, which means removal requires special environmental impact studies. Marcus stared at the papers, the legal language blurring as the implications sank in. Karen, this is my daughter's medical treatment we are talking about. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear Emma isn't well, Karen replied, her concern so obviously manufactured. It was almost insulting. But you know, personal circumstances can't override legal requirements. I'm sure you understand. Jake and Tony exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mr. Chen, we can't proceed without proper clearance, Jake said quietly. I'm sorry. As the contractors loaded their equipment back into their truck, Marcus found himself alone on his front lawn with Karen, who was now practically glowing with satisfaction. You know, Marcus, if you'd just been more cooperative about neighborhood issues in the past, the tree trimming, the fence height variance, that unsightly garden shed, maybe we could have worked something out. What do you want, Karen? Her smile widened. I want you to follow the rules like everyone else. File the proper applications, pay the impact study fees, wait for approval like a responsible neighbor should. How much are the fees? Oh, not too much. Maybe $15,000 for the environmental study, another $5,000 for the legal review, plus whatever remediation might be required if they find any groundwater impact issues. She paused, savoring the moment. Of course, that's assuming the study comes back favorable. If not, well, you might not be able to remove the pool at all. Marcus felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. You planned this. I researched the regulations, if that's what you mean. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. Karen closed the folder with a satisfied snap. I suppose. You could try to fight it, but legal fees for this kind of thing can get quite expensive. Much more than just paying the proper fees and following the process. Behind him, Marcus could hear Emma coughing, the harsh, persistent cough that had become more frequent in recent weeks. Each sound was a reminder of time slipping away, of treatments delayed, of hope diminishing with every bureaucratic obstacle. I'll pay the fees, he said quietly. Wonderful. I'll make sure to put in a good word with the review board. Karen turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Marcus? Next time you might want to be more careful about who you ignore when they're trying to maintain neighborhood standards. We all have to live here together, after all. As she walked away, 3 days after Karen's ambush, Marcus sat in the cramped office of Rebecca Martinez, the only lawyer in town who'd agreed to take his case on a payment plan. The walls were lined with law books that looked like they hadn't been opened in years, and the air conditioning unit wheezed like it was fighting for its last breath. "I've reviewed all the documents Karen provided to the county," Rebecca said, sliding a thick folder across her desk. "The good news is that most of her claims are either exaggerated or completely fabricated." Marcus felt the first spark of hope he'd experienced in days. "So we can fight this." "The bad news," Rebecca continued, her expression grim, "is that it doesn't matter. The county has to investigate every complaint, no matter how frivolous. And until they complete their review, the stop work order stands." "How long?" "Minimum 8 weeks. Could be longer if she files additional objections. During the process." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen too many desperate clients. But there might be another way. She pulled out a second folder, this one much thinner. "I did some digging into your neighborhood association's bylaws and Karen's role as secretary. Turns out she's been quite busy over the past year." Rebecca spread out a series of documents, complaint forms, violation notices, and correspondence with the county. In the last 12 months, Karen has filed formal complaints against 7 different neighbors. Pool installations, fence heights, garden modifications, even the color someone painted their front door. Marcus scanned the papers, recognizing several names from his street. "She's been targeting everyone." "Not everyone. Notice a pattern." Rebecca pointed to specific addresses. Every single complaint was filed against families with school-age children. Families who might use their backyards for birthday parties, playground equipment, or swimming pools. The pieces started clicking together in Marcus's mind. She wants the neighborhood to be quiet. More than that. Look at this. Rebecca pulled out a real estate listing from her computer. Karen put her house on the market 6 months ago. Private listing, no sign in the yard. She's been trying to sell without anyone knowing. Marcus studied the listing photos. Karen's house was immaculate, staged like a showroom, with professional photography that made it look like something from a magazine. She's preparing to move. Marcus realized, but she wants to maximize her sale price first. Exactly. And nothing hurts property values like neighbors who don't conform to her vision of suburban perfection. Rebecca closed the laptop. The question is, what are you willing to do about it? Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed with a text from David. Emma's temperature spiked. "Sarah's taking her to the hospital. You need to get there now." Marcus was on his feet instantly. "I have to go." "My daughter, go," Rebecca said, already gathering the papers. "But Marcus, think about what I showed you. Karen's weakness isn't the law, it's her own greed. People who are motivated by money always have pressure points." 20 minutes later, Marcus burst through the emergency room doors of St. Mary's Hospital. He found Sarah pacing the waiting room, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a double shift, her face drawn with exhaustion and worry. "Where is she?" Marcus asked, pulling Sarah into his arms. "They're running tests. Her white cell count dropped again, and the fever won't break." Sarah's voice was steady, but Marcus could feel her trembling. "Dr. Patel wants to start the next round of treatment immediately, but the insurance company is still fighting." "The approval," Marcus finished. Sarah nodded, her professional composure finally cracking. "They're saying the treatment is experimental, that we need to try other options first. But Marcus, there are no other options. This is it." Through the waiting room window, Marcus could see Emma in a hospital bed, looking impossibly small against the white sheets. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that beeped and hummed with electronic precision. "How much?" Marcus asked. Quietly. $200,000. For the full treatment course. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "The hospital will start on credit, but we need at least $50,000 up front to secure the treatment schedule." Marcus closed his eyes, doing math that didn't add up no matter how he calculated it. The pool would bring $60,000 if he could ever get Karen's stranglehold removed. Their savings account had been emptied months ago. The house was already mortgaged to its limit. "There might be another option," Sarah said hesitantly. Dr. Patel mentioned a clinical trial in Seattle. It would be free, but It's experimental. No guarantees. And would have to move there for 6 months, maybe longer. Marcus looked at his daughter through the glass, watching her sleep fitfully under the harsh hospital lights. Moving to Seattle would mean abandoning everything they'd built, leaving their support system, gambling Emma's life on an untested treatment. "I'm going to handle this," he said, his voice carrying a certainty he didn't feel. "Marcus, what are you? Trust me." He kissed Sarah's forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo mixed with antiseptic. "I'm going to get the money." The drive home took him past Karen's house, and Marcus was surprised to see unfamiliar cars in her driveway. He slowed down, curiosity overriding his usual desire to avoid his neighbor. Through the front window, he could see people moving around inside, people in business suits carrying clipboards and measuring tapes. Real estate agents. Karen was showing her house. Marcus parked in his own driveway and sat for a moment, Rebecca's words echoing in his mind. People who are motivated by money always have pressure points. He walked around to his backyard, where the pool still gleamed in the afternoon sun, unchanged since the contractors had been turned away. But now Marcus looked at it differently. It wasn't just a source of emergency funds, it was the centerpiece of Karen's campaign to control the neighborhood's image. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Rebecca's office. "Marcus, I've been doing more research," she said without preamble. "I found something interesting about Karen's property history." "I'm listening." "She's refinanced her house 3 times in the past 2 years. Each time, she's taken out more equity based on rising property values. She currently owes more on her mortgage than what she paid for the house originally." Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle sliding into place. She's leveraged to the hilt. And if property values in your neighborhood drop for any reason, she could end up underwater on her mortgage. That house sale isn't just about moving somewhere new, it's about financial survival. Marcus looked across the fence line at Karen's perfectly manicured yard, seeing it now through different eyes. The expensive landscaping, the professional, outdoor lighting, the pristine maintenance, it all spoke of someone desperately trying to maximize curb appeal. Rebecca, what would happen if someone filed a complaint against Karen? Something that might affect her property value. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That depends on what kind of complaint. Why do you ask?" Marcus was already walking toward his back fence, studying the sight lines between his property and Karen's. "I think Karen might not be as careful about following rules as she pretends to be." "Marcus, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking that if Karen wants to play games with bureaucracy and legal technicalities, maybe. It's time she experienced what that feels like from the other side." After hanging up, Marcus spent an hour walking the perimeter of his property, looking at his neighborhood with the analytical eye he developed during his years as a building inspector before Emma was born. Details that he'd overlooked as a neighbor suddenly jumped out at him as potential violations. Karen's fence was exactly 6 feet tall, the maximum allowed without a variance permit. But the decorative lattice work on top added another 6 inches, bringing the total height to 6.5 feet, technically over the limit. Her driveway had been extended in the past year to accommodate a 3rd car, but the new concrete extended slightly onto the city easement. A minor encroachment, but still technically illegal. Most interesting of all was the elaborate outdoor kitchen she'd installed in her backyard 2 summers ago. The structure included permanent electrical connections, plumbing, and a gas line, all modifications that would have required building permits and inspections. Marcus pulled out his phone and called the county permits office. "Hi, this is Marcus Chen. I need to request copies of building permits for 1247 Willowbrook Drive. I'm researching neighborhood compliance issues." 20 minutes later, Marcus had his answer. Karen's outdoor kitchen had been installed without permits. The fence extension had never been approved. The driveway expansion had no record of easement authorization. Karen Whitmore, self-appointed guardian of neighborhood standards, was in violation of at least 3 county codes. Marcus sat on his back porch, staring at the list of violations he'd compiled, feeling the weight of a decision that could change everything. Filing complaints against Karen wouldn't directly solve his pool problem, but it would give her a taste of her own medicine. More importantly, it would tie up her house sale in the same kind of bureaucratic red tape she'd used against him. The question was whether he was willing to cross that line, whether he was ready to fight dirty against someone who'd shown no mercy for his family's crisis. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, Emma's ask. The county inspector arrived at Karen's house at exactly 8 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, his white sedan pulling up just as she was loading her car for what Marcus assumed was another real estate showing. From his kitchen window, Marcus watched. Karen's face transformed from confusion to alarm as the inspector introduced himself and pulled out an official clipboard. Marcus felt no satisfaction watching his neighbor's distress. The previous night, Emma had been readmitted to the hospital with complications, and Sarah hadn't left her bedside in 18 hours. Every hour that passed without access to the pool money felt like borrowed time they couldn't afford. His phone rang. Rebecca Martinez's voice was tense. "Marcus, we have a problem. Karen filed an emergency motion claiming you're harassing her with frivolous complaints. She's asking for a restraining order and demanding the county investigate you for filing false reports." Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "Are the complaints false?" "No, they're completely legitimate. Her outdoor kitchen violates 3 different codes. But Karen's claiming the timing is suspicious, that you're retaliating for her legitimate concerns about your pool removal." Through the window, Marcus could see the inspector measuring Karen's fence with a measuring tape while Karen stood beside him, gesticulating wildly. "What does this mean for my pool situation?" "It means everything's about to get a lot more complicated. Karen's lawyer, and yes, she's hired one, is arguing that this is a neighborhood dispute that requires mediation before any permits can be processed." Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. How long does mediation take? Months. Maybe. Longer if neither side is willing to compromise. Rebecca paused. "Marcus, there's something else. I did some more digging into Karen's finances. She's not just over-leveraged on her house, she's 3 months behind on her mortgage payments." That information hit Marcus like a physical blow. She's facing foreclosure. The bank hasn't started proceedings yet, but they will if she can't bring the payments current. She needs that house sale, Marcus. She needs it desperately. As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus saw Karen marching across his front yard toward his door, her face flushed with anger. The county inspector trailed behind her, looking uncomfortable but determined to do his job. Marcus opened the door before Karen could knock. "You son of a bitch," Karen snarled, her usual facade of suburban politeness completely abandoned. "You think you can destroy my life because I followed proper procedures?" "Mrs. Whitmore," the inspector interrupted, "we need to stay focused on the code violations. This is an official inspection." "The violations are legitimate," Marcus said quietly, "just like your complaints about my pool were supposedly legitimate." Karen's eyes flashed with rage. "Your pool affects neighborhood drainage and property values. These petty complaints about fence heights and kitchen permits are just harassment. Tell that to the potential buyers who might be concerned about purchasing a house with unpermitted improvements," Marcus replied. The inspector cleared his throat. "Mr. Chen, I need to ask you some questions about these complaints. The timing of multiple reports against the same property raises some procedural concerns." For the next hour, Marcus found himself defending his right to report legitimate code violations while Karen's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman who'd apparently been on speed dial, fired questions designed to paint him as a vindictive neighbor abusing the system. "My client has been a model neighbor for 15 years, the lawyer argued. These complaints were filed within days of Mrs. Whitmore exercising her legitimate right to question Mr. Chen's unpermitted pool removal. The pattern suggests retaliation, not genuine concern for code compliance." "My daughter is dying," Marcus said quietly, the words cutting through the legal posturing like a blade. "Mrs. Whitmore knew that when she decided to block the only way I could pay for her treatment." The inspector looked uncomfortable. Karen's lawyer maintained her professional composure, but Karen herself had the decency to look away. "Personal circumstances don't justify filing false reports," the lawyer said, though her voice had lost some of its edge. "They're not false reports," the inspector confirmed, consulting his clipboard. "The outdoor kitchen lacks required permits, the fence exceeds height restrictions, and the driveway extension encroaches on city easement. These are all legitimate violations that need to be addressed." Marcus felt a moment of grim satisfaction, but it evaporated when Karen's lawyer smiled. "Of course, we'll contest every violation through the appeals process. That could take 6 to 8 months to resolve fully." The message was clear. Karen might lose eventually, but she could drag the process out long enough to make Marcus's life miserable in return. After the inspector and lawyer left, Marcus found himself alone on his front porch with Karen. Her anger had given way to something colder and more calculating. "You think you're so clever," she said, "but you have no idea what you've done. I've done exactly what you did to me. How does it feel?" Karen stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The difference is, I can afford to fight this. I have lawyers, I have connections at the county office, and I have time. Your daughter doesn't." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "You're talking about a child's life." "I'm talking about property values and legal procedures. The fact that you're dealing with a family crisis doesn't give you the right to ignore proper channels." Karen's smile was arctic. "But here's what I'm willing to do. Drop your complaints against me, and I'll consider withdrawing my objection to your pool removal." "Consider." "I'll need some assurances that you'll be a more cooperative neighbor in the future. The tree trimming we discussed, removing that garden shed, maybe some commitments about maintaining your property to neighborhood standards." Marcus stared at her, recognizing the trap. Even if he agreed to her demands, she could withdraw her consideration at any time, leaving him with no recourse and no leverage. "And if I don't agree?" Karen's smile widened. "Then we both lose. Your pool stays, my violations get tied up in appeals, and we see who can outlast who. The only question is whether your daughter can wait that long." That afternoon, Marcus sat in Emma's hospital room, watching his daughter sleep fitfully under the harsh fluorescent lights. The latest blood tests showed her condition was deteriorating faster than the doctors had predicted. Dr. Patel had moved up the timeline for the experimental treatment, but that made the financial pressure even more acute. Sarah sat beside him, holding Emma's hand and humming softly. She looked exhausted, running on coffee and determination. "The social worker stopped by earlier," Sarah said quietly. "She mentioned some programs that might help with the costs, but the waiting lists are months long." Marcus nodded, only half listening. His mind was racing through options, calculating scenarios, trying to find a path through the maze Karen had constructed around them. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "Dr. Patel thinks we should seriously consider the clinical trial in Seattle. Emma's response to the current treatment isn't what we hoped for." The words hung in the air, between them like a death sentence. The clinical trial was their last resort, the option they'd avoided because it meant abandoning everything familiar when Emma needed stability most. "How much time do we have to decide?" Marcus asked. "They need an answer by Friday. If we're going to relocate, they want to start the preparation process immediately." Marcus looked at his daughter, so small and vulnerable against the white hospital sheets. Emma had never lived anywhere but their house on Willowbrook Drive. She'd learned to swim in the pool Marcus had built, celebrated every birthday in their backyard, built forts in the oak tree Karen had wanted him to trim. Now he was faced with a choice: uproot Emma from everything she knew to gamble on an experimental treatment, or find a way to break through Karen's bureaucratic stranglehold. In the next 3 days, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Saw the inspector at your neighbor's house today. Might be interested in what I know about her situation. Coffee tomorrow." Mike Torres. Marcus stared at the message, not recognizing the name. But something about the timing and the vague offer of information made his pulse quicken. He typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately: "Former contractor. Did some work for your neighbor last year." Let's just say not all of it was exactly by the book. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, not hope exactly, but the possibility of leverage. Real leverage. Where and when? Denny's on 5th Street. 7 a.m. Marcus looked at Emma, then at Sarah, who was watching him with growing concern. "What is it?" she asked. "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything." Marcus stood up, leaning down to kiss Emma's forehead. "I need to make some calls. There might be another way to handle this." As he walked out of the hospital, Marcus felt the weight of a decision that could either save his family or destroy what little stability they had left. Karen thought she held all the cards, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed that a desperate father would fight fair. Tomorrow morning, Marcus was going to find out just how dirty Karen's hands really were. And if Mike Torres had the information he thought he did, the war Karen had started was about to become very one-sided. Mike Torres was already seated in a corner booth at Denny's when Marcus arrived, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee cup that looked like it had been refilled multiple times. He was younger than Marcus had expected, maybe 45, with the kind of deep tan that came from years of outdoor construction work. "You must be Marcus," Mike said, standing to shake hands. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you'd show." Marcus slid into the opposite seat, studying the man who might hold the key to his daughter's future. "You said you had information about Karen Whitmore." "I did work for her last summer. Kitchen renovation, some outdoor improvements." Mike's voice was careful, measured. "Let's just say I learned some interesting things about your neighbor." "Such as?" Mike glanced around the nearly empty restaurant, then leaned forward. "Karen hired me to do her outdoor kitchen project. Big job, $10,000 worth of work. Problem was, she was very specific about how she wanted it done." "What do you mean?" "She didn't want permits. Said it would take too long, cost too much in fees, and that nobody would ever know the difference." Mike pulled out his phone and scrolled through photos. "She paid me an extra $2,000 to keep it off the books and make sure it looked naturally integrated with the existing structure." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "You have proof of this?" "Photos, text messages, even a recording." Mike turned his phone screen toward Marcus. "See, Karen made a mistake. She assumed I was just another contractor who'd cut corners for cash. But I've been burned before by clients who don't pay, so I document everything." The photos showed Karen's outdoor kitchen in various stages of construction. But more importantly, they showed Karen herself directing the work, pointing to where electrical lines should be run without permits, where the gas line should connect illegally to the main house supply. She knew it was illegal. Marcus asked. "Oh, she knew. In fact, she bragged about it. Said she was too smart to waste money on bureaucratic nonsense when she could get the work done for half the price." Mike scrolled to a text message thread. "Look at this." Marcus read Karen's messages with growing amazement. She had explicitly instructed Mike to avoid permit requirements, hide the electrical work behind decorative panels, and ensure that any inspections would find nothing obviously wrong. "But here's the really interesting part," Mike continued. "After the work was done, Karen decided she didn't want to pay my full invoice. Said the work wasn't up to her standards, that she'd found some minor issues that justified reducing my payment." "Did you take legal action?" "I threatened to. That's when she got nasty." Mike pulled up another series of messages. "She said if I caused any trouble, she'd report me to the licensing board for doing unpermitted work. Said she'd claim I pressured her into avoiding permits to save money." Marcus stared at the messages, seeing Karen's true character laid bare in black and white. The same woman who was blocking his pool removal over supposed regulatory concerns had deliberately circumvented those same regulations when it suited her purposes. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. Mike's expression darkened. "Because yesterday, Karen called me. Apparently, she's heard about the code violations you reported, and she's panicking. She offered me $5,000 to say I completed all the work with proper permits, that any violations must have happened after I finished the job." "You're saying she wanted you to lie to county inspectors?" "I'm saying she wanted me to commit perjury to cover up her own illegal activity." Mike finished his coffee and signaled the waitress for another refill. "I may cut corners sometimes, but I don't lie to government officials. That's a felony." Marcus felt pieces of a larger picture falling into place. "What else aren't you telling me?" Mike hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "There's more. Karen's not just worried about the kitchen violations. She's got bigger problems." "Such as?" "When I was working on her project, I noticed something odd about her property. She's got a septic system that feeds into what looks like a private drainage field. But according to county records, her house is supposed to be connected to the municipal sewer system." The implications hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. "She's been dumping untreated waste into the groundwater." "I can't prove that. But I can prove that her septic system is connected to drainage that flows directly toward the neighborhood storm drains. And I know for a fact that she never got permits for that system modification." Marcus stared across the restaurant, his mind racing. Karen hadn't just violated building codes, she'd potentially created an environmental hazard that affected the entire neighborhood. The same woman who'd claimed his pool removal might affect drainage patterns had been illegally modifying her. Own drainage for years. Why didn't you report this before? Because it wasn't my problem. I was hired to do kitchen work, not plumbing inspections. Mike leaned back in his seat. But when I heard she was trying to destroy some guy's family over pull permits while sitting on her own pile of violations, it started eating at me. Marcus's phone buzzed with a call from Sarah. He answered immediately. Marcus, you need to get here now. Sarah's voice was tight with panic. Emma's taken a turn for the worse. Dr. Patel wants to move her to intensive care. The world seemed to stop around Marcus. I'm on my way. He ended the call and stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. Mike was watching him with concern. Your daughter? Mike asked quietly. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Listen, Mike said, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. Everything I showed you is on here. Photos, messages, documentation of every illegal modification Karen asked me to make. If you need ammunition against her, this is it. Marcus took the flash drive, feeling its weight like a weapon in his palm. Why are you giving me this? Because I've got a daughter too. And if some bureaucratic bully was standing between her and medical treatment she needed, I'd want someone to help me fight back. 20 minutes later, Marcus burst through the ICU doors to find Emma surrounded by monitors and machines, her small body dwarfed by the medical equipment keeping her stable. Sarah was talking quietly with Dr. Patel, their conversation heavy with medical terminology that Marcus didn't want to understand. How is she? Marcus asked, taking Emma's hand in his. The infection has spread, Dr. Patel explained. We are controlling it for now, but we need to make a decision about treatment immediately. The experimental protocol I mentioned, we can't wait any longer. Sarah's eyes were red from crying. They need an answer by tonight, Marcus. If we're going to Seattle, we have to leave tomorrow. Marcus looked at his daughter, so fragile and still, fighting a battle she was too young to understand. The flash drive in his pocket felt like it was burning through his clothes. Give me 1 hour, he said. Marcus, 1 hour. There's something I need to do. He kissed Emma's forehead and walked out of the ICU with purpose that felt like divine intervention. In the hospital parking lot, he called Rebecca Martinez. Rebecca, I need to file an emergency motion with the county. Environmental violation, potential health hazard, the works. Marcus, what are you talking about? Karen Whitmore has been illegally dumping septic waste into neighborhood storm drains for over a year. I have documentation, photos, and a witness willing to testify. There was silence on the other end of the line. Are you certain about this? Completely certain. And Rebecca, I want to hold a press conference tomorrow morning. I want every neighbor on Willowbrook Drive to know exactly what Karen's been doing while she's been lecturing everyone else about property standards. Marcus, this is nuclear. If you do this, there's no going back. Marcus looked up at the hospital, where his daughter was fighting for her life while Karen Whitmore played bureaucratic games with their family's future. Good. I don't want to go back. By 6 o'clock that evening, Marcus had filed formal complaints with the county health department, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Municipal Water Authority. By 7 o'clock, Rebecca had contacted 3 local news stations about a story involving illegal waste dumping in a suburban neighborhood. At 8 o'clock, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed Karen's number. You have no idea what you've done. Karen's voice was shaking with rage. I've done exactly what you taught me to do, Marcus replied calmly. I've followed proper procedures and filed legitimate complaints through appropriate channels. This is different. This is karma, Marcus interrupted. You want to play games with regulations and bureaucracy? Let's see how you handle it when the EPA shows up at your door with soil contamination tests. I'll destroy you for this. I'll make sure you never get permission to remove that pool. I'll tie you up in legal battles for years. Marcus felt something cold and final settle in his chest. Karen, by tomorrow morning, your house will be under environmental investigation. Your mortgage company will be notified about potential contamination issues. Your buyers will run for the hills, and your property will be essentially worthless until the cleanup is complete. You can't prove. I can prove everything. Photos, documentation, witness testimony from the contractor you tried to bribe. Marcus paused, savoring the moment. Oh, and Karen? The EPA takes groundwater contamination very seriously. I'm told the fines can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The line went quiet for so long that M.